This is episode 3, man. We made it. We made it. So I do spend a little bit too much time on Umar Johnson. You know, your favorite segment as well, how to approach women. Hope you guys enjoy it. Check it out. Yo, I know y'all finished watching that New Edition. Well, it's been a while, right? That New Edition story on BET, which I need to watch, but I heard that there was a part where, you know, they get to the part where they split up and Ralph Tresvant goes dolo, you know what I'm saying? And 3 of them become BBD, Belle Biv DeVoe, right? So, and then, you know, Bobby Brown is on his own. Anyway, BBD had this hit single called Poison that came out in the 90s. And there's a part in there that I used to quote all the time, and I hear a lot of people quote it too, where they go, "You can't trust a big butt and a smile." Yep, I said it. I quote, "You can't trust a big butt and a smile." Well, several years later, I realized that you can very much so trust a big butt and a smile. Matter of fact, if you see a young woman with a big butt and she smiles, that means that sun is shining on you today, brother. So next that, you know what I'm saying? We don't get down like that no more. So the song is still dope. I still rock the Poison when it comes on. But truly, you can. Yes, you can, ladies and gentlemen. You can trust a big butt and a smile.
Yes.
The name of the game is Light Works. Night of the Slips. The name of the game is Light Works.
So for this episode, I'm sipping on Old Chub Scotch Ale. It's an ill story for this one, man. This one is brewed and canned at Oscar Blues Brewery. Yeah, Oscar Blues Brewery. One time I went to Trader Joe's, and I just stumbled upon it, and I copped it. And yo, it was good, man. They come in these green cans, you know what I'm saying? And it was actually inexpensive, and I copped it and drunk it, and like my friends drank it. They're like, yo, this is good stuff. The thing is, that night, like mad people came over and they bought like mad brew. So it kind of got lost in the mix, and I couldn't remember where I got it from. You know what I mean? I couldn't even remember the name. So like I went to like all these different places to look for it, and I couldn't find it. And then one day I happened to be in Trader Joe's, buy some sangria, and boom, it was in there. So yo, shout out to Old Chub Scotch Ale, Oscar Blues Brewery. You doing your thing, Thizzle, man. Thank you. Peace. This was supposed to be done for episode 2 as well. I didn't get a chance to do it. And I know I keep apologizing for it. But again, back to the matter of Kung Fu flicks. Probably one of my favorites are The Drunken Master, the 1978 version starring Jackie Chan. Now, I know there's been different iterations of the idea of a young man learning drunken Shaolin style Kung Fu from a Shaolin monk. There's been some remakes of actually Drunken Master and Drunken Monk. But this is by far my favorite. And actually, if you ask me, this is one of Jackie Chan's most humorous performances. And the choreography stands the test of time. I know 1978 is a long time ago. Heck, I was only 5 years old at the time. And it also stars the late, great Sing Ting Ewing playing Sam Seed. And he really gets he takes the trope of the you know, old Asian wise man. He takes that trope and he really flips it on his back. And then pretty much like his just role as a drunken master was just funny. So couple that with Jackie Chan, and it's actually really good, really, really good. It doesn't take itself too seriously like a lot of the martial arts that came out at that time, but I highly recommend this one. I used to have this on VHS too. I see a lot of people do this, man, right? They be like, yo, I'm humble, bro. Let me just say this. If you humble, you don't need to tell people you humble. Usually, if someone is humble, everybody peeps it and says, the so-and-so is humble. saying you humble doesn't make you humble. Just to give you a heads up on that, all right? Get a dictionary, get a thesaurus, man. Chill. I got a DM on my Twitters asking me to deal with folks who put memes that say things like stimulate my mind, or I want somebody to stimulate my mind. And a lot of times I'd be like, what are y'all talking about? Because like, that's why I'm gonna have a little clip about sapiosexuals. Like, a lot of people want someone to like do things that they should already be doing, right? And don't get me wrong, man. I try not to knock anybody's taste if you want a particular taste, but what do you mean about stimulate your mind? Like, what do you want? Like, what does that mean? Like, and honestly, like, a lot of people don't even know how to have conversations, and a lot of people don't really know how to like do things like critical thinking, right? Or do things that like really, really, really challenge their minds. So I don't understand how, like, if you don't do those things for yourself, how you expect somebody else to come and do that in an intimate relationship, right? And then on top of that, like, don't get me wrong, like, when you meet someone that you really care for, they are going to change you, right? They are going to help you think. It's supposed to help you think and challenge you, right? But ultimately, those are things you should be doing yourself. You shouldn't ask anybody else to do them for you. And like, really, if someone does challenge you like that, you should be doing the same thing to them, and at the same time, we don't get into relationships to have someone mold us and vice versa, right? You don't get with somebody to like, I'm gonna make this person better at this, right? You with that person because that person makes you feel good, and that not only that, but you make them feel good, right? So you shouldn't be in the business of molding and shaping people and trying to make them be better thinkers or whatever. They should already be doing that themselves, right? Constant elevation, right? So let's be careful on that, because it's kind of like one of those things where people will go on vacation and they go to like a tropical island and they see the sunset. They be like, oh, the sunset is beautiful. But the sunset's everywhere on the planet. So you should really like notice how the sun sets where you live at and appreciate that on top of appreciating when you travel to a different country or whatever, right? And I look at it the same way. So if you're looking for somebody to stimulate your mind, like, that's cool and all. You want somebody like that. Like, I like surrounding myself with people who are critical thinkers and are consistently thinking of new ways and ideas and being open-minded. True indeed. But you should be doing that for yourself. So you should be stimulating your own mind instead of expecting somebody else to do it for you. Word. Word. I'm gonna try to not hit this subject too hard, because I know a lot of people hit it up. But I'm gonna talk about Umar Johnson, quote unquote, Dr. Umar Johnson, right? I got introduced to him through a friend of mine who still puts this event together down in Virginia. I'm not gonna mention any names, but I got hip to Umar Johnson back in 2004 before he called himself Doctor. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not even gonna lie. Back then, he was still on the psychology tip. So he talked about mental health, and that was his lane. And I'm not even going to front. In 2004, he was dropping jewels, man. He stayed in his lane. He told us the deal, gave us the laws and all that. Says give him a call. He worked in the Philadelphia school system, et cetera, et cetera. So I continue to follow him. Again, I'm a member of the conscious community. Some of y'all know us as Hoteps. And yes, I embrace that word because I still say Hotep. I know there's some of us who don't make Hoteps look pretty good. So that's why it's a term that's used to ridicule people who think like that. Anyway, that's a topic for another episode. So I kind of followed him in 2004. I might want to say 2005, right? But I remember my middle son, he was born in 2003. That was kind of like, he was a year old when I actually saw him speak, Umar speak. So anyway, fast forward a couple years later, I moved to the Midwest and he comes to town. I go check him out and I noticed that he's on some extra shit, And what I mean by extra shit, I mean like he's left his lane. And I think the problem with a lot of people is that a lot of us, all of us, is that a lot of times we jump in lanes that are not ours. And you know what? It's nothing wrong to critique other people in those lanes, but when we try to jump on those lanes that are not ours, I think that's when a lot of problems arise. And I think that's probably Umar's biggest issue, is that he jumps in lanes that are not his. So he started doing history and all that. He started getting into things that, economics, that I kind of feel like he's not an expert on, and that's where he falls short. And I could see if he was quoting other people, but he wasn't doing that. Anyway, fast forward a couple years later, I'm chilling with my barber, Woke Dave, who I'm trying to get as a segment on the show, on this podcast. And he was like, yo, you hip to Umar? I'm like, yeah. So I came to see him speak. He started talking about history. He claimed to be a descendant of Frederick Douglass. Then he started calling himself the Prince of Pan-Africanism. Mind you, let's not even talk about his homophobia, his transphobia, and all that. We're not even talking about that yet. But, those are things that I could actually, take out and be like, yo, my man is claiming that he's a descendant of Frederick Douglass. Now, at first I believed him because he was doing the knowledge, and he was talking about, how who in his family tree is connected to Frederick Douglass. And those are kind of things that, face to face, I can't refute. You know what I'm saying? If you're saying that your great grandma was a descendant of Frederick Douglass, who am I to be like, who you talking about, right? But I just found it funny that he kept calling himself the Prince of Pan-Africanism, you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, in the conscious community, a lot of us take titles that some of us probably didn't even earn, but Prince of Pan-Africanism, he's talking about he's the man. Now, I think the thing with Umar is that he came in at the right time, because when he first came out, YouTube wasn't around. And he jumped right on board when YouTube came out, so you have a lot of these quote-unquote YouTube scholars. Shout out to Wesley Muhammad. I got that from him. So quote unquote, all these YouTube scholars who were coming out making a whole bunch of grandiose claims about a whole bunch of stuff, right? And they're all over the internet. They get paid a pretty decent amount of money to lecture and travel around the country. People fly them out, et cetera, et cetera. So he caught on to that. He made a name for himself, really without putting in any work. Now I know people that he's helped. When it comes to IEPs in school districts, he's helped people out with that. I've seen that happen. So I can see, again, that's his lane. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a historian, right? By trade. So I'm not in that lane. Mental health, that's not my lane. That's his lane. So I'm not going to critique him on that, but that's his lane. So you see that happen. And again, he's Prince of Pan-Africanism. And then next thing you know, the family of Frederick Douglass are like, he's not related to us. That's red flag number one, right? On top of the homophobia, right? On top of that, right? On top of the way he treats black women, right? Because a lot of us in the conscious community, we talk a good game, right? We call our black women queens. We do this and that, but we don't really respect them on the whole. Most of us, I'm not going to say all of us, but most of us do, right? So that comes out. Then what happens is he's on a radio show. I can't remember which one it was. And they ask him if he was single. And he says he's been celibate for X amount of months. Boom. A young lady out of Philadelphia, I'm not going to mention her name either, but she comes out and says, wait a second. Me and I have been an item for a while. And she has the receipt. She puts it on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. So boom, he's calling a lie. 2 strikes, right? So 2 red flags, right? And once you kind of do that, you know what? If he had said, yo, my bad, I didn't know the gist of your question, you know what I'm saying? Then, I could kind of forgive him. But no, he doubled down, called this young lady who happened to be a sex worker, called this young lady all kinds of names. And it's like, damn, B, I thought she was for black women. So after that, man, I was done with dude. I'm like, man, I can't really mess with dude. So the fact that he's on the Breakfast Club, people giving him a platform, people are supporting him, it kind of sucks. But I don't mess with that dude for that. And then he goes around and he, let's talk about the school. Okay, he's trying to put a school together, right? And there were a few people, scholars, mind you, educators, who had asked him for a curriculum. Didn't have one. Again, not his lane, right? He's not an educator. And I could see if it was somebody else and they were educators and somebody asked them and they had it, but that's not his lane. So that's questionable right there. That's red flag number 3, right? He generates X amount of money, right? Doesn't gain the money. He needs like about what is it, like $1 million, 1.5 million, maybe $2 million. He doesn't get that money. What does he do? He goes on, and it's on YouTube. He blames black people, right? Oh, black people, right? He actually even blames the young lady he was messing with and says that he was going to get $1 million from some NFL or NBA player, but that fell through. Again, man, questionable, man. Really, really questionable. So I don't know what's up with this dude. And then that situation they had with Samu Setter, where he went on and he did a video on his cell phone or whatever, and he threatened this guy to fight in the street. And it was just like, again, I'm from the Bronx. If you want to do the fisticuffs, you could do the fisticuffs. I'm not a violent person, but there's no need for me to go online and just talk junk about somebody and threaten them. It's just, dude is just real problematic. I know that word is used a lot, but I'm going to leave it right there. I mean, if you still defending him, I got to question your sanity. I got to question who you really down for. You know what I mean? And people will say, well, he's a brother. We got to support him. It's just like Chuck D said, every brother ain't a brother. And just like our ancestors said, just because they skin folk don't mean they kinfolk. You know what I mean? So like, not everybody's down for the cause. There are people that are charlatans. There are people that are come in and they'll take your money and don't really care about you. And I'm going to put him in that category. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel about him. And I'm not going to talk about him no more. And the only reason why I talked about him is because a lot of people had straight up asked me about him. And they continue to ask me about him that I know face to face. Word.
As I come back, bullets for best don't leak like Aquafina trash, nigga. These shots will swell you bigger than Katina ass, nigga. Got couple left for opio and A+. Watch how the gauge bust as I come back. Hey, Bobolina, Mr. Bob Dobalina ass, nigga. Back to get quicker and then I spit him at.
I don't know about you all, but in my house, Cardi B is a saint. We know her as Saint Cardi B. Matter of fact, I need to go ahead and order that candle that got her posing as the Virgin Mary. Word is born. I need to get that from the Botanica. Saint Cardi B.
This is a man's world, but it would be nothing without. This is a man's world.
Part 3, QBC, sit blind McCarthy. Heavy on the list. You blink my ice ring. John Lee Green, yeah, that's small. Part 3, QBC, sit blind McCarthy.
This again is everybody's favorite segment, how to approach women. I know lately we've been doing a lot of preliminary stuff, but I think it's important that we do that because I just don't want to lead anybody on. I don't want nobody to be like, okay, let me just jump into it. There's a lot of things we need to do before we even walk through the door, right? So right now, the next thing, the third thing I'd ask cats to do, I'm not going to do a recap either, is pay attention to detail, all right? This is something that we fail to do as men across the board, even when we're with somebody, right? We just fail just to pay attention to detail. A lot of it is rooted in sexism and patriarchy, where we don't value women's opinions and stuff like that, or what they say, but really pay attention to detail. What I mean by that is when you come through the door, right, pay attention, man. She might not want you to talk to her, and there's so many ways this young person can tell you, or old person, my bad, can tell you that they don't want you to talk to them, right? For example, if she's walking down the street and wearing headphones, chances are she don't want you to talk to her, pretty much, right? If she is sitting down reading a book at a park bench, chances are she doesn't want to be disturbed. And I know me, I like to read books. I really don't like people disturb me at all when I'm in the middle of a book. Even my wife gets on me. I'm like, why are you bothering me while I'm reading this book? You know what I'm saying? So just those are just a few telltale signs. When you talk to them and they're kind of like non-responsive, like they give you like closed-ended answers to your open-ended questions, pretty much she does not want you to speak to her. So just pay attention to detail. Just those little things that you got to pay attention to, and it'll just save you rejection, right? So just really, really pay attention to those things. If it's a hot day and she's sweating, she probably wants people to leave her alone. She probably had 20 other people who try to talk to her. So just, again, pay attention to detail. I hope all this helps. For real, for real.
The name of the game is Life Works. Night of the Slips. The name of the game is Life Works.
finally finished reading Star Wars Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. Great book. I got a lot of questions. I know that when Disney bought Star Wars, Lucas Ltd, they got rid of like a whole bunch of books, like 130 books. They just were not considered canon anymore. Also, the Dark Horse comics were not considered canon. Just the early Star Wars Marvel comic stuff was considered canon. And now Marvel has released a whole bunch of new comic books, and that's considered canon now. Still, though, there are a couple of books that Disney has released under the Star Wars department, I guess you can call it, and they are considered canon. And this one is one of them, Thrawn. Grand Admiral Thrawn is a member of an alien species called the Chiss. And they live outside of the known galaxy in what's called the unknown regions. And he was actually probably one of my favorite villains of all time. Like, yes, even above Darth Vader. He's like a tactician. He's like a strategist. He studies the culture and arts of different alien species to learn how to beat them in battle. And he comes from an alien species that their whole thing is built on honor and warfare and warriorship and everything. Anyway, back in the 90s, Timothy Zahn, I hope I'm saying that right, is Zahn. He wrote a series about Thrawn and the rise of the Empire. It was a 3-part book, a trilogy, and it's probably one of the best-selling Star Wars books of all time. And it's really good if you have a chance to read it. They also have trade paperbacks for that, and if you want to read it further, and they're kind of long. But anyway, that's not canon anymore, so they have Admiral Thrawn coming, and it shows his rise to power, how he first came into the Empire, and then he rose to power. I realized that in the Clone Wars, this TV series, which is considered canon, he was introduced to Anakin Skywalker as a young officer from the Chiss Ascendancy. So they kind of bring that up in this book. Again, it shows his career as he comes into the Imperial Navy and how he works his way up to become Grand Admiral Thrawn. I don't know. See, this is the thing. They're saying in this series that he came to the Empire to make them stronger, to fight against an evil that's much stronger and more powerful than the Empire, which in the old canon, the pre-Disney canon, we know that as the Yuuzhan Vong. And the Yuuzhan Vong is an alien race from outside of our galaxy, even further past the unknown regions, that they have a religion that says that all technology is like a sin, like they don't have no technology. They use like organic materials for their technology, like their weapons are all like animals and stuff like that, and they go through space and they live in like coral reefs through space and stuff like that. It's really dope. And they have a religion that says that pain is eternal, pain is the only sure thing. So they do all these rituals that cut into them and make them feel pain. And they end up fighting against what later on will be the Republics. Now, I don't know if they're going to deal with that later on in Star Wars, because as we can see through the movies, they're going into like deeper territory. So who knows? Anyway, for those of you that are hardcore Star Wars fans, definitely check out Star Wars Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. I have such difficulty saying the phrase toxic masculinity. I think I had to do like 4 takes for this one. Anyway, I wrote a piece a couple weeks ago and I posted it on medium.com, and no, they're not paying me. In it, I talked about how when I was a young Thundercat, or young Wily Cat, right? I should say young Wily Cat. I wasn't a Thundercat at the time. Living in New York City, and how I didn't know that I had the option of not buying into those ideals of male posturing, tough guy shit, right? Anyway, I love the fact that my sons realized very early that they did not have to buy into those fake ideas, of whack ideas, I should say, of what it is to be a young man. How you have to do this male posturing and always have your chest out and always do tough guy shit and talk and walk a particular way. Even though I raised my kids to be warriors, they still don't fall into those false ideas of manhood, right? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that in this segment, and maybe I can continue this, considering the feedback that I get. So I just wanted to, point that out on how. And I had my students ask me that. They were like, well, what would you tell your child if somebody put their hands on them? And I was like, first of all, what they don't do is they don't put their hands on nobody else. Like, that's like the respect they put out, and that's what the respect that they demand. Because I noticed that a lot of times with my kids, like, you know, they do a lot of horse playing, they do a lot of, you know, physical stuff, particularly between the boys and the girls. I see that happen a lot, and I teach at a middle school, so I see that happen a lot. And usually it escalates to a point where someone says, hey, you're in my space. But at that point, it's one of those things where, well, you know, I put my hands on you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now you got a problem with it. So I always tell them that, first of all, my kids understand space, right? They understand that people need their own space and that people don't want to be touched all the time, right? So, and I teach them about consent, because that's a big deal too, right? So number one, my kids never put themselves in that situation. And then number two, I try to teach my children ways for them to negotiate, ways for them to discuss it, ways for them to just talk about, you know, what the situation is and what the problem is. And I think if you teach young people those tools, they'll be okay. Also, we have to lead by example. And I know a lot of times we're very quick to tell our kids, don't do this, but then we'll turn around and do exactly the same thing that we told them not to do. So if I'm going to ask them not to, you know, fight immediately, I have to do the same thing when I'm with them, right? I have to, when I go deal with customer service, I shouldn't cuss that person out. What I should do is I try to figure out ways to get what I deserve and what I earned, right? But what I see a lot of us do is I see a lot of us go into these places and these spaces and really like abuse and go off on people who really, it's really usually not their fault. They're just customer service. They're just the face of the company or the organization that we're working with. But it's still violent, right? When we interact with one another, we do the same thing as adults. If anything, I think adults do much worse things than children. Not only because we know, not only because I say that not to imply that we should do better, but it's because we know better, right? We know better. We know we're not supposed to be doing certain things. So again, we should have to buy into these ideas of tough guy shit. I see it happen at barbershops. I see it happen in the gym when we playing basketball with each other. We interact with one another. We always want a posture, and I think that's something that we need to avoid.
The name of the game is LifeWorks. Night of the Slips. The name of the game is LifeWorks.
I was supposed to do this on the first and second episode, and I didn't get a chance to. I'm supposed to give shout outs to some people. Number one, the first person I want to give a shout out to is my girl, Science with Steph. She has a podcast called The Dope Science Show. It's really, 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 really dope. You should definitely check it out. Follow her on Instagram as well. And then the other person is the homie Chico Leo, because really, man, Chico Leo really inspired a brother to do a podcast. Like, people have been asking me for years, and I refuse. People have asked me to be on their podcast, and I refuse. But Chico Leo be laying it down, man. So shout out to him, man. Word is born. And also, just thanks to all the feedback that I've been getting. I really appreciate it. If I went down the line, I probably wouldn't have time to do that, right? And I didn't mean to rhyme on that side either. Ooh, I did it again. Word is born. Shout out to y'all people. I always forget to do these until the last minute, right? But I got to make it official, right? Again, thank y'all for listening. I appreciate it. You can reach me via Twitter at OMI's Podcast. That's OMI as in Indiana, S Podcast on Twitter. Or you can just hit me up at Dan Trezomi on Twitter as well. DANTRESOMI. Also, that Makes It You Heard, that James Brown, This Is a Man's World with Godfather Part 3, that's done by none other than the most famous Amerigo Gazaway. He does probably one of the dopest blend tapes out there. We're going to talk about mixtapes in the next episode. So, yo, thanks again, party people. Peace.